Cathar Mysteries. Cathar Love 178. This video was brought about because a week or so ago I just happened to see this brief video on YouTube, and the question was asked, what was the difference between the Templars and the Cathars? And this person replied, this person who purports to be a Cathar, replied that there was no difference. Well, of course, there are great differences between those two, which I'll explain some of them as well. But I thought, why not just answer that, but also other questions that people tend to ask and have asked me regarding the Cathars, which makes the Cathars quite mysterious. So, Cathar Mysteries. So some of these topics, I'll just mention what they are, and then we'll go into them. So what were the Cathar connections to the Templars? Why did the Catholic Church want to destroy the Cathar heresy entirely? Why did they completely disappear at that time? Why did their beliefs make them dangerous to the Church? What were the Cathar origins? What are the difference between the Essene beliefs and those of the Cathars? And of course, is this information correct? So I made some notes because there's a few points I don't want to miss out on. So I'll refer to these notes. So regarding the Templars and the Cathars, well, the first thing is that Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who organised the rules for the Cistercian monks, which was the largest of that type of organisation in Europe, he devised the rules or created the rules for the Templars. And so in effect, Templars were Cistercian monks on horseback. They were warrior monks. But where the confusion arises with the Templars and the Cathars is because there's no known instance that I'm aware of where a Templar knight attacked or killed a Cathar or Cathars. Certainly in the Battle of Muret, which is on the 13th of September 1213, when the Northern Knights under Simon de Montfort defeated Peter of Aragon and the knights from around the Languedoc, and both the Hospitalier Knights and the Cathar and the Templar Knights looked on, but they didn't take part in the battle. And what they did, they tended to the wounded and they killed after the battle. Many Cathar Knights, especially after that battle, when a lot of the lords that they normally served were dispossessed by the Northern Crusading Knights. So a lot of those Cathar Knights became Templar Knights. So there's all these connections. But the main reason why the Templars didn't kill Cathars, because part of the rules that Saint Bernard of Clairvaux laid down for them was that the Templars were not to kill other Christians. And of course, the Cathars, they may have been heretics, but they were still Christians. So the very rules stopped them from killing them. The other thing that certainly separated them, the Templars were the bankers of Europe. They were the richest organisation in Europe. They had something like over 10% of the land in France. And in Paris, they actually owned 25% of Paris at that time. So they were wealthy and they were bankers and they were rich and they were powerful, and they also were allowed to carry their swords, which was not allowed for others. So they're a very powerful organisation. And whereas the Cathars were the opposite. They were into sharing, communal living. They weren't into gathering money. And so there's all these major differences between the Cathars and the Templars. Of course, the biggest thing was of all was the Cathars didn't believe in killing animals, so they were very much Buddhists of the West. Why did the Catholic Church want to destroy the Cathars? Well, it's a mystery. Some of the things are mysterious, but essentially, the Cathars were growing. The Cathars themselves are supposed to have taken a census, and they numbered around about 4 million. But the church didn't like them at all because, one, they didn't pay taxes and tithes to the church, and the church was very much about money. The church didn't have equality of the sexes. Women were second-class citizens. They still are. They can't take part in church activities. Whereas with the Cathars, the women were the same as the men. The Cathar clergy, the parfaits, quite different to the Catholic clergy, but the women could take part. They preached and they taught the same as the men. They estimate that probably around 40-45% of the Cathar parfaits, the good men, the good women, the perfecti, were actually women. So that set them apart. The Cathars weren't interested in baptism. You married, you didn't marry them. It was no big deal to the Cathars. The other thing was that to the church at that time, that women were supposed to have a baby each year. In fact, St. Jerome said if a woman doesn't have a baby, she's actually committing murder. It's a bit heavy going. So the Cathars raised their families. Breda de Montserrat, I think she had 6 children. Esclarmonde de Foix, she had 4. So these people raised their families, had a normal family situation, but later in their life they wanted to pursue the spiritual side of their life, and which they did, and they became Cathar perfecti. Another thing that really separated the church didn't like is the Cathars said everything to do with the body was natural, which included sex. So whereas that was, oh my gosh, having sex for pleasure to the Catholic Church, it's still a no-no. It's for making babies. So there is major differences, but the big thing was that the Cathars were growing in size and numbers and popularity, and they had to do something about it. So they brought in the Albigensian Crusade. Then later that didn't work, so then later the Inquisition. Why did they completely disappear? Well, they completely disappeared because of the Inquisition. But it still took the Inquisition 200 years to wipe them out. But the Inquisition was such that neighbour spied on neighbour, and one person could turn another person and call them a heretic. They didn't have to be identified. If you were a lawyer and you stood up for a Cathar, you were then tried for heresy yourself. So it was only a matter of time before the heresy was wiped out. But that was the Inquisition that was the reason for that, which was staffed mainly by, in Europe, by Dominican monks. Why did their beliefs make them dangerous to the church? Well, we've already spoken about some of those things, about the equality, but the other thing was that the universal love, the Cathars had this unconditional universal love which they preached. They didn't kill any animals, equality. Another thing was that the Cathars believed that this is one of many lifetimes. They believed in reincarnation. Whereas with the Catholic Church, you only have one life, and that life is at the end of it, you either went to heaven or hell for eternity. And if you weren't a Catholic, you automatically went to hell. So these, again, were major differences and between the Catholic Church and the Cathars. The big thing, the big one, and the single mystery which still pertains to the Cathars, and people argue and scholars argue and historians argue, and the largest mystery is what were the Cathar origins. Now we have scholars like Stephen Runciman, This is his book, The Medieval Monarchy. And as far as history is concerned, he really nails much of what is known about the Cathars historically. But he believes that the Cathars came from the Bogomils in the Middle East, and the Bogomils, they were derived from the Paulicans, evolved from the Paulicans, which were a warlike tribe. But these were all heretics, had heretical views of the Catholic Church. With the Bogomils and the Cathars, they both termed themselves as children of the light, bring light where there's darkness. But whereas the Cathars had this equality of the sexes, this total equality, the Bogomils still hadn't arrived at that level of equality. To arrive at where the Cathars originated, or the Cathar movement, although they didn't refer to themselves as Cathars, that was conferred on them by others. They were simply the good men, the good women, the bon homme, the bonne femme. We have to really go back to the Essenes. The Essenes were a radical Jewish sects. Can't get away from heresy. They believed with the Jews at the time of Jesus, of Yeshua. They had love, but you could love a Jew between Jew. You could have love between Jews, but Jews couldn't love anybody else. Whereas the Cathars said no, the Essenes said no. We believe in universal love for everybody. So that set them apart from the Jews. Also, they believed everybody was equal. Everybody was born equal. And so the Essenes had no slaves, which made them unique at that time, because it didn't matter whether you're Jews or Greeks or Romans or Germans or in England or UK, everywhere, East and West, had slaves. The Essenes were quite unique in that respect. They believed that everybody was equal. And they also, they were vegetarians. They meditated. But they taught medicine. There was 6 Essene groups. One of the major ones was the Nazarenes, which John the Baptist was a Nazarene, and Yeshua, Jesus, he was a Nazarene. Now, the church, and they say that he was born in Nazareth, and in fact Nazareth, I think, is the largest town in Israel now. It's quite a bustling city. But the plain fact is that the Israeli archaeological people, they did excavations in Nazareth, and they found that there was no town of Nazareth until 300 years after the time of Christ. But the church not wanting Yeshua to be a Nazarene, they created this. He was born in Nazareth. It's simply not true, because Nazareth simply did not exist. This is simply modern science. Argue with the archaeological department of Israel, who were just as interested as Christians in defining biblical history. His wife, Mary of Magdala, who was pregnant at the crucifixion, she belonged to a sect called the Therapeutai. And as the name suggests, they were into herbs and minerals. And they are described by Philo. He was a Roman historian. And they were very, very big in Egypt and Cairo, as were the Nazarenes. And they still had this in common, but they also believed in universal love, these Essenes, and didn't believe in animal sacrifice. One of the reasons they're not mentioned in the Bible, it's believed, is because not believing in animal sacrifice, which the other Jews did. They sacrificed the goats and lambs and sheep in the temple, in the inner temple. the Essenes didn't enter the inner temple because they didn't believe in blood sacrifice and the sacrifice of animals. They had this total equality, and that was the Essenes, and this is what they went out, and this is what they taught, and so this is very, very much similar to the Cathars, especially the Perfecti, who are vegetarians, celibate, did not sacrifice animals, believed in universal love. The Essenes, like the Cathars, believed in reincarnation, lifetime after lifetime. Now, how did the Essene beliefs, presuming that the Cathars did have their origins there, how did they arrive in Europe? Well, here we go back to the situation where Yeshua Christ didn't die on the cross. He was in a bad way, but he was taken down and he was revived through healing ministrations, and eventually he arrived later, but he escaped to Egypt because he was a convicted criminal, and later he rejoined his wife, Mary Magdalene, his mother, Joseph of Arimathea, in France, and they travelled to the Pyrenees region of France, in the south of, which is now the south of France, the Languedoc, Midi area. And as being a criminal, they kept a very low profile, but they still taught still had the teachings of the Essenes of universal love, equality, equality of the sexes, and all these things. And it was from this groundswell which was there, and it was there over the centuries, and eventually around about the millennium, that various people who held these beliefs, and they'd already wanted to pursue a more spiritual, mystic life, and these people banded together, and we really have, this is the origins of the Cathar movement in Europe. So this flies in the face of history. And very few historians believe this. Now, we go full circle and we come back to the Templars, because the Templars were destroyed, but there were Templar organisations and castles, and they were very much, they had lands in what we call now the south of France, in the Pyrenees area. And it's believed by a number of people, writers, there are books on the subject, not many, that the Templars knew of the whereabouts of, or they knew the whereabouts of the graves of the Holy Family, because at that time was the Cathars, and not just also Templars, they were often buried in caves. This is to stop their bodies being abused by people who were their enemies. So there is this Cathar connection in this respect, and it is said, and I believe, it is it's the secret of secrets as far as the Templars were concerned, that they did know. Now this is not all Templars, this would only be the hierarchy, the upper echelons of the Templars, but they took those secrets to them to the grave. Now, a little bit of prophesying from me. I believe that in the coming years there will be writings and other things that are going to be discovered, because after 700 years the laurel will again grow green. So there will be things that will be discovered which will give credence to the historical aspects of the Cathars and also of the Templars. What I've basically talked about now, I've checked with my guides, and they say that basically this is the actual truth of it. Certainly not all of it, and it's certainly not all the Cathar mysteries and not all the Templar mysteries. But I certainly suggest that if any of you do have connection with your guidance, and especially if they're Cathar guidance, that you also check whether what I've said basically is accurate, or reasonably accurate anyway. So these are some of the mysteries pertaining to the Cathars primarily, and certainly the largest mystery, the thing that certainly hasn't been explained, is the connection and the close resemblance to the Essenes' beliefs and their practices and their daily rituals and those of the Cathars. So it means having a really open mind, but one can see the connection if one believes that Christ, Yeshua, didn't die, and that the Holy Family did arrive in the south of France, arriving at the little port of Sainte-Marie-de-la-Mer on the Mediterranean. So it would be one of the major mysteries which pertain to the Cathars. Bye for now. Nice to talk to you.